more than a service company for the special interests. And Ken Salazar puts on the white hat and says there's a new sheriff in town, and goes about sort of trying to clean up an agency that had descended into rank criminality, and MMS staff partying with oil staff, oil company officials, and doing drugs with them. The corruption at this agency is really sort of hard to overstate. But what Ken Salazar did, he has a chief of staff who's a former attorney general with Colorado, and they sort of cleaned up the rank criminality bit, but the reform didn't go any farther than that. So they left in place top managers who'd risen through the ranks in this incredibly pro-development oil culture, such that on the day that Ken Salazar announced his reforms of MMS, in the Alaska office, they served a cake that says "Drill, baby, drill" on it. And so this is the rot at MMS extends far beyond what was a criminal problem, and it goes to managers who only get promoted if they sort of suppress science and fast-track drilling, and so that's the culture of this place, and which is a long-standing problem. But they had promised to clean it up, and then. But instead of doing that, they, again, like I said, they started to just throttle up offshore drilling to unprecedented levels. And, to his credit, when Salazar came into office, he also threw out Bush's plan to open up essentially every coastline in America to offshore drilling. And this was just sort of a last-minute wet dream for the oil companies. That was not a serious proposal, and no one expected that to stand. The Bushes put it in the Federal Register either at midnight or after midnight on the day that they left. So this was not anything more than a gesture on their part. And so Salazar, to his credit, took that off the table. But a year later came back with his own plan, which essentially split the baby, and seemed to split the baby along political lines, so that red states were exposed to new drilling, and blue states, including the Pacific Coast, were not, and the Atlantic coast north of New Jersey. And so he and President Obama appear at an Air Force base in front of an F-18 fighter jet and a giant American flag, and this sort of stagecraft that had all the trappings of the mission accomplished photo op. And they said, we've looked at this for a year. This is a hard decision. We've looked at it for a year. We're ready to roll here. And Salazar said, our reforms are working. We have an agency that's capable of handling this. And then a couple days later, President Obama, unbidden, says, oil rigs are safe. And so they took ownership of this completely right before the disaster, without having implemented any of the substantive reforms that they should have. And so what that did is it left in place a drilling program that not only it's a complicated issue, but the Bush environmental reviews were structured so that you would have a detailed environmental assessment of the region, an environmental assessment of the individual leasing blocks, and then for each drilling project they would get a categorical waiver, just a get out of environmental review free card. And so the BP drilling site had gone was sort of, and each drilling permit was based on these three levels. And so it said, well, we did the review at the top, and then we did the secondary review, and the tertiary review we don't have to do because we did the other two reviews. But the other two reviews were crap. They didn't account for the possibility. They called a blowout a low probability, low risk event, which is, I can understand the low probability part, but the low risk is just absurd.
Tim Dickinson, we have to break. We have to break, but we're going to come.
But so the short story is that they took the Bush's word on the science and then issued the get out of environmental review card free to BP.
Under Obama. Tim Dickinson will be back in a minute, political correspondent for Rolling Stone. His piece is "The Spill, the Scandal, and the President."